Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's been a second since I've done a book video. I've been kind of trying to get caught up on vlogs and all of our travels. So I didn't film a wrap up for August. So I figured right now I'd just sit down and film everything I read in August and September. First book that I finished in August was Poirot Investigates. This is a book by Agatha Christie. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. This is a series of short stories. So it's all about Poirot, her classic detective, just in a bunch of little short snippets of stories. I thought it was good. It's definitely not as good as like a full-fledged plotline in a book. Short stories just will never compare to a full book. But it does give you a nice, fun little look at Poirot and Agatha Christie's writing style. I think that this is a great book to be reading while you read other books. Like, it'd be fun to have this and just go read a short story every once in a while when you wanted a quick mystery, and then be able to put it down and come back to it really easy because they don't feed into each other. They're all just super short, quick stories. Then the next book that I read was actually an audiobook, so I don't have the physical one. I'll put the cover here, but it was The Twist of a Knife by Anthony Horowitz. This is book 4 in the Hawthorne and Horowitz series. I've talked a lot about the other videos, talked a lot about the other books in different videos, so I'll link a couple of those if I can remember which ones it was in. But basically the premise of this series is a detective comes to an author and asks him to follow him on some of his cases and write about them. But the fun twist is that the author in the book is the author of the book. So it's Anthony Horowitz is one of the characters. And so it's just this kind of weird mixture of fact and fiction and trying to figure out what's actually happened in real life and what's just part of the book. I gave this one 4 stars as well. I definitely, out of the 4 books in the series, I liked the first book the best. The other ones were good. I don't know how I feel about how they wrap this up. I feel like, I'm trying to remember, it's been a while since I listened to this, but I feel like I kind of was hoping they'd make another book. And I can't remember if they are or they aren't. I guess let me look it up really quick, but from what I can remember, it felt like there should be another one. Yeah, I think there is another one coming out in April. So it's not a finished series yet. Didn't know that going into it. But book 4 was good. I feel like it left kind of a lot of open stuff. I don't know. It wasn't my favorite of the series. I feel like the first book was really good and the rest have been like, okay. They're fun mysteries and they're really good audiobooks. Okay, so that was on our road trip that I read The Twist of a Knife. When we got to St. George, I probably talked about this a bit in the road trip vlog, which is not out yet, so that will be coming. But I started the Natural series, which this one has been taking the internet by storm. It's by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, the same author as the Inheritance Games. This one is basically about these young teenage prodigies that the FBI recruits to work on cold cases because they have really good skills in various things that help with identifying murderers, essentially. And so you're following this main girl, Cassie, I believe that's her name, yeah, Cassie, and she is getting recruited into this existing team of naturals and being asked to work on cases. Her mom was also murdered, and so you're getting little glimpses of that, trying to figure it out. This one I also gave 4 stars. There's a lot of 4 stars. Good books, just not quite like new favorites. I thought it was a really fun, quick read. It's a little more on the thriller side than the Inheritance Games was. I feel like this was a little more freaky. That was more just like general mystery. I don't know. I feel like I didn't necessarily have any main gripes about this. It's definitely love triangle heavy, which was a little annoying to me. But I just wasn't a book that made me immediately need to go pick up the next book in the series. And I feel like if I don't immediately need to know what happens next, it's not quite a 5 star. So not a ton of complaints. It's just not quite at the 5 star level for me. I thought it was good. I can understand why everybody's hyping it up right now, but I haven't felt a major urge to go and read the rest of the books. I probably will at some point. I just don't feel like it left it off on that much of a cliffhanger. Like, I don't know where the rest of the series is going from here. I'm assuming at some point they'll solve her mom's murder, but other than that, you don't really know what's going to happen next, and so I don't feel like it left me on a big cliffhanger. So if you're looking for a fast book that doesn't leave you on a cliffhanger, this could be a good option. Alright, this is where I'm going to start getting a little bit out of order, because the next book that I picked up was Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. This is the first book in the Robert Langdon mystery thriller series. Basically, the character Robert Langdon is a symbologist at Harvard, and he gets called in to basically consult on a murder that is related to the Illuminati, and ends up on this whole big spree trying to basically help protect the Vatican from the Illuminati, but he's also working with a scientist who is involved in it, and she's basically created antimatter. Is that what it's called? I think it's antimatter. That the Illuminati threatening to blow up the Vatican with. So it's a really fast-paced one. I had originally put the Da Vinci Code on my TBR for August, and then I realized that this wasn't the first book, and so I went and got this one. I really love this one. This one's been my favorite one out of the series so far that I've read. I gave it 4.5 stars. I feel like it definitely took a while to get into the setup of explaining all the science behind things and the history of the Illuminati and the Vatican and all of that stuff. But once it picked up, it went really fast. Basically, this whole book happens in about 24 hours. It's super jam-packed, a lot happens. I thought that, I know there's a lot of controversy around these books as far as religious people go, in the Catholic Church, but I thought he did a really fair job in this one of showing the good and the bad of both sides of science and of religion. So loved this one. And then I didn't immediately go into the next books. I did kind of go every other with this in the next series that I'll talk about, but I'm just going to talk about all of these for right now. The next one was the Da Vinci Code in this series. This is book 2. Basically, same professor gets called in. It's another religious murder, but this time it's of the curator at the Louvre in Paris, and it's all about another Catholic organization. It's like a Catholic adjacent organization. So it's not necessarily a sequel so much. I feel like you could totally read these out of order and you'd understand what is happening. But I do feel like there was some good context given in Angels and Demons about the character of Robert Langdon that you miss if you were to jump right into this. I gave this one 4 stars. I didn't like it as much as the first book, but I have already seen the movie of it. So I don't know if it's just that I kind of knew it was coming and I'd seen the movie, and so it just didn't really surprise me as much, but I didn't love this one quite as much. So I gave that one 4 stars. And then also in these few months, I did get to the Lost Symbol. I gave this one 4 stars as well. I thought this was pretty on par with the Da Vinci Code. This one is taking place in DC. It's all about hidden stuff in the US Capitol. And a scientist who is basically trying to scientifically prove that souls exist and stuff like that. And I'm trying to think what the... Oh, and this one's all about the Masons. That's the big organization. Here is the Masons. So that one's good. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was good, but not quite as good as Angels and Demons. This one's just a little slower paced. Angels and Demons so far has been my favorite. There are 2 more books in that series. I don't know when I'm going to get around to reading them, but I do want to for at some point, and I do already own them. So those will be happening at some point, just maybe not this month. In between reading those books, I kind of did an every other thing with Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. It is a very thick fantasy book. Essentially, you have this young librarian named Laszlo who's always been obsessed with all of these legends of this city that nobody can get to and nobody knows if it's real anymore, and all these legends that are surrounding the city. And then one day he gets the opportunity to see his dreams, essentially. It's hard to say much more than that without spoiling things. It's a very magical book. I would definitely say that this is, as far as romance, it's definitely romantic-y. So as somebody who doesn't love romance, I thought that the first book actually did it really well. I felt like it was a romance that I actually cared about and I felt like contributed to the story. So if you're someone like me who doesn't love romance in their fantasy, I thought it was actually done really well. I did give this one 4.5 stars. Also, can we just take a moment for this cover? I will say though, the ending of this book is awful. Like, not that it's written poorly, it's just so sad and it made me so mad that I couldn't decide if I wanted to immediately go into the second book or just never read the second book because I was so angry about how this book ended. But I think that is a sign of how good the writing is in this book that I was able to feel that mad about it. So that one was 4.5 stars. And then I did read the second book, which is called Muse of Nightmares, which does also have a really cool cover, even for just being paperbacks. They have like the foiling on them and stuff. Muse of Nightmares, I gave 4 stars. I didn't like it as much as the first one. And basically it picks up just immediately after the events of the first book. It could almost be one book, like there's no time gap. It's just immediately from that book to this book. I feel like the first part of the book, the love story did kind of get us sidetracked, and I felt like it got very romance heavy in a way that just kind of bogged us down. So I think that a lot of this could have been cut out for the non-romance lover in me. If you are someone who really loves romance, this would be a great fantasy duology for you because it is super focused on the romance, but I do feel like it got a little sidetracked. The first one was totally PG, like very little physical. This one got a lot more physical, not to the point where I don't think it qualifies as YA, but it was much more physical than the first book. So that's your heads up. I thought the ending was done really well in this one. I do think she wrapped it up good. I feel satisfied with it being a duology, but there's also totally room for her to write spin-off series on it. So that's the Strange the Dreamer duology. I would highly recommend. I think it is really good, and I am definitely interested in reading some of her other books. On our road trip, when I was listening to The Twist of a Knife and reading The Naturals, we also started listening to Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. I hope I'm saying that sort of right. But this is a fantasy book set in essentially a mystical Nigeria is how I would put it. I don't know that it's necessarily supposed to be Nigeria, but there is a Lagos in there, so it feels like it's like a twist on Nigeria. But basically they are living in this world that used to have magic, but then the current king came and wiped out magic and got rid of it. And our main character, Zaylee, is one of the children who could have gotten magic if magic had not been wiped out. You kind of get that for setting the stage, and then she gets the opportunity to bring magic back. And so this book is all about her going on this trip, on this quest to try and restore magic and bring it back to their kingdom. It is super good. I definitely like reading the book better than the audiobook. I think the audiobook was super helpful for getting pronunciations down, because not only is it fantasy names, which are already hard, but they're definitely rooted in like African pronunciation, and so it is a little bit tricky to figure out some of the names. I think most of them I would have gotten, but a lot of the like locations and things I think I would have had a hard time saying. But the audiobook was really helpful for that. I do feel like I just had a hard time getting into it, so I listened to probably like the first half of the book on audiobook, and that took us like days while we were on a road trip, and then I sat down and I finished this in like 2 days reading in the physical book. So I think I'm just not much of an audiobook person, but I really love this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. There is several POVs which I liked. I think that each character was given a very distinct personality, and you could sort of tell when you're switching POVs even without the labels. So I thought that was really done well. It's got a very fun setting, a very unique magic system. I love about this magic system that, and just generally about magic systems, is when there's like a limiting factor where it's not just like unlimited power. Like this one, it's limited by certain things that are in your blood, and you can build up your ability to do magic, but it's not something that you can just like come in and be all powerful and you have magic, and there's like rules and restrictions on it. And I think that those are some of the most fascinating magic systems, so highly recommend. I do have the second book that I hope to be reading soon. It's not on my October TBR, but it's one that if I get through my TBR, I'll definitely be picking it up. So, and this is going to be a trilogy, I believe, and the third book's not out yet. I hope it comes out soon. This left on quite the cliffhanger, and so I'm a little nervous to pick up the next book until I know when the third book's coming out, because I'm scared that it's also going to end on a cliffhanger, and I don't want to have to wait for forever, so I might try and kind of space them out a bit. And then the last book that I read this month, so in September, was back to Agatha Christie. I read Halloween Party. The reason that I picked this up is because there is a new movie out called A Haunting in Venice, which is supposedly based off of Halloween Party. Having talked to my younger brother went and saw it, and so I talked to him a little bit about kind of what the plot was in this book, because based off the trailers I was just like, I don't see how this relates. I don't understand still how it's linked to this book at all. It seems totally different. But I can see why you changed the plot, because I gave this one 3 stars. This is my least favorite Agatha Christie I've ever read. And it was still good. It was still like a good mystery. I just feel like there was too many things going on to where I couldn't even make theories, because there's just so much information getting thrown at you that just seemed completely unconnected, and you were just missing really important information. And so I just feel like mysteries are fun when you are theorizing and you're coming up with all these things and then they still fool you in the end, and you're like, oh, but I didn't come up with that, but I did come up with a lot of possibilities. And this one, I just felt like I could never get connected. I could never understand exactly what was going on or make any of the connections. I had no theories at all. And so it just wasn't my favorite. So I can see why they changed it a bit in the movie format. I don't know if I'm gonna go see the movie because I don't really like horror movies, but I did read the book. It was 3 stars. It was still good. I still love Agatha Christie's writing and will try to read every book she ever writes. But this isn't the one that I would tell you to start with. If you've never read an Agatha Christie, I would start with a different book. Okay, those are all of the books that I read in August and September. So let's move on to really quickly my October TBR. The first book on my October TBR is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I've actually already started reading this one. I am currently at page 79. So I have started reading this. If you haven't seen Babel, it got pretty big like a while ago. But basically it is a fantasy book where all of the magic in the world is based off of translation. And so you're following this kid who came from China, from I think Canton is his like actual place, but this rich white guy comes in. His whole family just died from the plague. The white guy saves him and then takes him to England to study languages and translation at the school at Oxford called Babel. And that's about as far as I've gotten. But from what I understand, this is a pretty good critique on colonialism, I guess, and cultures, and giving up your culture that you grew up with, your like native culture, to assimilate into one that gives you more opportunities and stuff like that. So I'm really interested. It sounds like it's maybe a little bit of a slower read. My husband said that it's slow, so this is my first one. I want to finish Babel because I have already started reading it, and it is just such a good fall book and vibe. It's your dark academia, and it is fully fall here in Utah. The colors are changing, so I will be reading Babel with all the best vibes. And then speaking of fall and it being October and Halloween spooky season, I do have Frankenstein by Mary Shelley on my TBR for this month. I don't feel like I need to really explain what Frankenstein is, but I feel like it's just a good classic, and what better time to read this than right before Halloween. So Frankenstein's on the list. And then I wanted to have one more like thriller book on my TBR for October, so I've grabbed, and then there were 4. I don't know a ton about this book. I found it at a like library sell, and so I read the little summary and I thought it was interesting. Basically, it sounds like there's a bunch of high school kids, and they are to be honest, it doesn't really explain a ton, but it sounds like some of them have a near-death experience and they think someone's trying to kill them, and they're trying to figure out who it is. And then it sounded, based off something I read somewhere, that maybe they start to suspect their parents of trying to kill them off or something like that. I don't know. I did look it up on Goodreads and it didn't have the greatest reviews, but I'm hoping by going into it with like no expectations, no prior knowledge, that maybe I'll like it a little better. We'll see. I'm just looking for a fun thriller that's not like too scary. So that's And Then There Were Four. It's by Nancy Werlin. And then continuing with the mystery, so on more of a mystery, but still kind of supernatural, I want to reread The Haunted Mesa by Louis L'Amour. This is one of my favorite books of his. I have read it a couple times before actually, but essentially your main character is a ghost hunter, and that is his career. And so he gets a call from one of his friends that's an archaeologist down in, I believe they're in Arizona. I don't know if it ever says for sure, but I believe he's in Arizona. He gets down there to visit his friend who is digging on some Anasazi ruins, and his friend has gone missing. And so as the ghost hunter that he is, he starts trying to figure out where his friend disappeared to. And it kind of ensues from there. It's a whole supernatural take on how the Anasazi disappeared. There's a whole mystery going on in town and like the present day stuff, and it's just a really fun mystery with a Western take. Louis L'Amour is a Western author, if you didn't know. He is kind of his classic Western author, but this is his like modern day mystery book that I think is actually super fun and great. So I plan on rereading this one this October. And then the last book, I wanted something that just felt fun and magical for Halloween and October, and so I have added The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brandon Sanderson. This is one of his newer books from what I believe. To be honest, I don't know hardly anything about it. My husband's just a big Brandon Sanderson fan, and so he bought this book when he saw it cheap at a half price books while we were on our road trip. And so we figured we'd buy it. He hasn't read it yet, so I don't know. Maybe I'll read the little blurb really quick. A man awakens in a clearing in what appears to be medieval England with no memory of who he is, where he came from, or why he is there. Chased by a group from his own time, his sole hope for survival lies in regaining his missing memories, making allies among the locals, and perhaps even trusting in their superstitious boasts. His only help from the real world should have been a guidebook entitled The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England, except his own copy exploded during transit. The few fragments he managed to save provide clues to his situation, but can he figure them out in time to survive? So it sounds like it's maybe a time traveling book, but it just sounds fun, and I think this will be a good lighthearted read for October. Alright, and with that, that is the end of this video. That is everything that I read in August, September, and everything that I plan to read in October. So look forward to a video at the end of October with my thoughts on all of those books. Hopefully I can get through all of them. It's kind of an ambitious TBR, but I'm hoping with fall break this month and just some of those being hopefully faster reads, that I'll be able to get through quite a few of them. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any thoughts or would like to discuss any of these books in the comments below, I would love to hear your thoughts on them. Just please don't spoil anything on my TBR for me, or any spoilers for other people. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.